Hey everyone, welcome to the show today. My so-called fabulous. I'm Tiffany and welcome. Today, my goodness, we are talking about something. We're going to solve a problem or we're going to try to. And you know what? We're going to create awareness and education. And let me tell you how. Today, we're talking about history, legacy, and understanding something that has shaped much of where we are today. Okay, think about this. We're talking about Juneteenth. Do you know what it is other than it's June 19th? Some of us may have heard of this, but may not fully understand, and this is why this still matters. I'm joined today by Jared Howard, CEO of the National Juneteenth Museum, right here in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm really approaching this conversation today from a place of wanting to better learn and understand myself, alongside you, my audience, that needs to hear more. Because you know what? We can always change and we can always make a difference. So, Jared Howard, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany. I'm excited to be here.
It's so exciting to be here. And to get you here, my daughter is in junior league and she
Stalked
heard,
me.
yeah,
She
she
stalked
saw
me.
you and
No, she stalked me.
oh, she,
She stalked me.
stalker, my stalker daughter. She came home and she said, Mom, you have to get this gentleman on the show. I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? So I send them query to your website and lo and behold, last night I was having dinner with one of my best friends, and she goes, I know, Jared, look here. We took a picture and sent it. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a small world. But welcome to the show. So I want to start with you.
Yeah.
What led you to this work? And we're going to get into the work you're doing
hmm
because you're doing a lot of work. So
hmm
tell us what led you into this work.
Yeah. So let me say again, Tiffany, thank you for having me first and foremost. Really excited to be here. Wonderful opportunity, and I'm appreciative.
Thank you.
My placement here, I believe that I am placed here as opposed to found my way here, right? I think, as a person of faith, I think that God controls everything around me, and I think I was placed here to do this work. How that manifests itself, though, is I am a sixth generation Fort Worthian, and my great great grandmother was Amanda Davis, and that name may mean something to you, as she is the woman that founded the community in Fort Worth that we know as Stop Six, right? So she's the first African American property owner in Stop Six, right? And so this is in the late 19th century. And the byproduct of my lineage is the fact that I grew up in and around the Stop Six community with a very strong affinity for it, its history, its essence. It's just inbred in who I am. When I went to school at the University of North Texas, the my friends from Houston and Dallas told me just how little they thought about Fort Worth and in Stop Six in particular. And it was the genesis of some indignation in me, if you will. And I set out at that time as a freshman in college to make people realize the value, um, the beauty of the city of Fort Worth. True story.
Wow.
So I set off on a 25-year career in corporate America that included stops at BNSF Railway, Bell Helicopter, the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. I was the first African American hired as an executive at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. The common denominator there is that all of these companies are based in Fort Worth, right? So I've never had an opportunity to work for a company that wasn't based in Fort Worth. I've been all around, but I've worked for Fort Worth-based companies. And during my tenure at the Fort Worth Chamber, Miss Opal Lee, a little old lady you might have heard of before, called me one day and she said, "Hey, I want you guys to support my Juneteenth festivities." And I said, "Miss Opal, unfortunately, we're not in position to help you the way you want us to." And she invited me over and said, "Well, I get what you're doing for the chamber, but what about you? What about Jared?" She's known me all my life. And I said, "Miss Opal, I've got this vision, this dream of building this culture center in Southeast Fort Worth that has Black culture at the center of it. Because, Tiffany, the beauty of a city is the cultures that exist within the city. Here in Fort Worth, we can talk about the beauty of Clear Fork, right? And the cultural footprint here. We can talk about the stockyards. We can talk about the north side, the west side of Fort Worth. They all have this cultural identity. Well, African Americans in the city of Fort Worth don't have that. We had that, but we don't. And I've wanted to spur that. And that desire is the genesis of what we're doing now with the National Juneteenth Museum. So, how I got here is my zeal for the city of Fort Worth and my desire for Black culture to be represented as the city continues to evolve.
You said something in the past tense, had this.
Hmm.
Explain
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
know what I've listened,
yeah.
but tell us had is past
So if
tense.
you were to rewind the clock in the city of Fort Worth, Fort Worth has historically been particularly friendly to Black life and culture. To be sure, William Madison McDonald, which is maybe a name you've heard of before, Texas's first Black millionaire, was from Fort Worth. He was a Fort Worth guy, and he curated a whole neighborhood with his dollars and resources. The south side of Fort Worth, the historic south side of Fort Worth, right off of Rosedale and Evans Avenue. And in the middle of the 20th century, it was the epicenter of Black life, not just in Fort Worth, but in DFW, right? So there's a place that used to be there called Drake's Cafeteria. You might have heard of it before. Some people that you may have heard of a time or two, like Michael Jackson, right? Shout out to the movie Michael.
A cover. I
Uh,
might have heard that.
Prince, Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner, Cab Calloway. These people ate at Drake's Cafeteria, which is in the heart of the historic South Side of Fort Worth. And when another gentleman came to Fort Worth named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he stayed with a lady named Beta Felder who lived in this community. And so it is ripe and rich with history. And so when we talk about the beauty that used to be, there's no shortage of rich history in this community in Fort Worth. And so we are literally trying to recapture what once was in this community.
What happened to that community?
Really simple answer to that. And there are four answers to it: I 35, I 30, 287, and Riverside Drive. Those are the answers to
Mm.
that question. As is true in many cities like Fort Worth across the country, in the middle of the 20th century, highways bifurcated communities, right? And so, right now in the city of Fort Worth, if you were to look on the east side of I 35 at Rosedale, you see the Chamblee Library, you see the more than 100-year-old Mount Zion Baptist Church. If you look on the west side of I 35, you see the Gwynn School, you see Baker Chapel, funeral home. So that whole community used to be one large community, but in the 50s and 60s, the highway system was built and it cut the heart out of the community. And we've been reeling ever since.
You mentioned that that we are going to post the video, the YouTube video about the museum and this community in the show notes for sure, and I'll share it in my stories. But you mentioned the life expectancy
Yeah.
of someone living in
Yep.
that community. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so 76104 is the zip code of the people in the historic South Side, not just historic South Side neighborhood, but the Morningside and Hillside neighborhoods as well. And predominantly, and certainly historically, there have been African American people there, and that is still true today. Well, the 76104 zip code happens to have the dubious distinction of having the state of Texas's shortest life expectancy rate, right? So 12 years below the national average. The people in the historic South Side and Hillside, Morningside communities generally live to be in their early 60s, whereas the national average is 77 years old. What's ironic about that, Tiffany, is the proximity to the medical district. So you talk about irony. These people are less than a mile away from 11 full-service hospitals, yet they suffer from medical conditions in ways that other people do not. And so when you talk about the social determinants of wealth, the social determinants of health, they're generally at the bottom end of that spectrum.
Right. How are you going to rebuild this community?
Yeah, starting with the National Juneteenth Museum. And so what I'll tell you, and I'm sure we'll get into it later in the podcast, in the cast, is the museum. We would do the city of Fort Worth and quite frankly, this community a great disservice if it were just a museum, right? So when you look at the history of this community, it was not only rich with culture, it was rich with community. So you being from Fort Worth, you cannot live in Fort Worth and not be familiar with the Jubilee Theater, right? It was founded by a gentleman named Rudy Eastman. Well, Rudy Eastman, before there was a Jubilee Theater, there was a Sojourner Truth Theater. The Sojourner Truth players were on the corner of Fabens and Rosedale, which sits in the middle of the historic south side of Fort Worth. That is where Rudy Eastman cut his teeth, right? And so when you talk about the history of the community, art was present here. There are people like Dewey Redman, who's a world-renowned musician from this community. Ornette Coleman is from this community, right? These are people that are from this community that went to I.M. Terrell High School, right? So this is all in the heart of this community. Drake's Cafeteria, which I mentioned before, the more than 100-year-old Mount Zion Baptist Church and Mount Pisgah Baptist Church. This was the heart of the community, right? And so if you're going to revitalize what was, you have to consider what was and try to reproduce. So the museum is the anchor of a rebuild, but it doesn't just include a museum. It also includes a 250-seat theater, right? So why is the theater important? Because people like Leon Bridges come from this community. People like Kirk Franklin come from this community. People like Channing Godfrey Peoples come from this community. Channing recorded a whole movie called Miss Juneteenth right in the heart of the historic Southside community. So we've got the theater. I say it often, and I said it to the ladies of the Junior League. There's one restaurant in this community to go sit down and have a meal at. Can you guess the name of it?
No,
Jack in the Box. And so if
I
I'm
couldn't do it.
going to worship at the Mount Zion Church on a Sunday morning and I want to go have a meal after church, the only place I have to do it is a Jack in the Box, which is a sad indictment on a
Oh,
communal and on a community in the heart of the 10th largest city in the country. And so we're going to have a food hall to shift that trajectory. So we'll have 5 local food vendors in the National Juneteenth Museum. And so now when the people in the community want to go and have a meal, they don't have to go have a jumbo jack, right? So we're excited. So again, the museum is solving problems. We're also going to have a business incubator, right? So the reality is not everybody's going to go to TCU and graduate from the purple bubble,
correct.
right? It's a blessing to be able to do that. But some people are going to be plumbers
Mm-hmm.
and some people
Sure.
are going to be welders. Well, the reality is just because you're a plumber doesn't mean you're relegated to make $70,000 a year. We intend to bring in Joe the plumber and teach him entrepreneurial skills so that he goes and opens Joe's Plumbing. And now he makes $7 million a year and hires 100 people in the process. Right. So that's the spirit of what we're trying to do. And in the process of doing that, we intend to revitalize, literally. If you look at the etymology of revitalize, re means to do again, vital means, vital signs, to rebirth life in the
Mm-hmm.
historic South Side. So
Wow.
we're ambitious, but we're pretty bullish on the fact that we're going to do it.
That is so impressive. And I mean, your renderings are beautiful. Again, we'll put this YouTube up. It is amazing, amazing.
Thank you.
So impressed. Okay, I'm going to take this down history. We've been talking
Yep.
history, but we're going to go back 100 years or so,
Yep.
at least. And I want to talk about what Juneteenth is. And I want you to share with our audience what it is. I know
Copy
what
that.
it is because I just do. And I've studied a lot, again, like I talked about this early in the podcast. But tell me and tell everyone what it is because they don't
Yeah.
know, right? Am
Yeah.
I being disrespectful?
So what Juneteenth is not is the day that the enslaved people of Texas learned about their emancipation. That is not what Juneteenth is. Quite frankly, the people in Texas were made aware of their emancipation when the Emancipation Proclamation became law on January 1st, 1863. In fact, they knew about it before January 1st, 1863, because on December 31st, 1862, they had this thing called Watch Night, which is still a tradition the black church holds today, where people get into the church and they offer praise and they offer worship and they offer prayers to God for both what they had experienced and what they anticipate going forward. And so the enslaved people of Texas anticipated, it was called Freedom's Eve that day. So keep in mind Freedom's Eve, December 31st, 1862, because they anticipated their freedom that was imminent according to the law on January 1st, 1863, because that is when President Lincoln signed bills that the emancipated people of the United States are free. Well, January 1st came and they were still enslaved. June 1st came, they were still enslaved. December 1st, 1863 came, still enslaved. June 1864, still enslaved. December 1864, still enslaved. March 1865, still enslaved. It was on June 19th, 1865, where General Gordon Granger and the Union soldiers arrived in Galveston. Here's the key word: to enforce the emancipation that had been guaranteed by the Emancipation Proclamation 2.5 years prior. So now keep in mind, Tiffany, that for that whole 2.5 years before June 19th, other states had enslaved people in other states had received the enforcement of their emancipation. The Union soldiers, think about geography, right? So coming from the north, going around the southeastern seaboard, you go to Georgia, you go to Alabama, you go to Louisiana, you go to Mississippi. They had been freed. All of those states have their own Emancipation Day. But Texas was the last state where the Union soldiers arrived to enforce. Again, there's that key word, the emancipation of those formerly enslaved people. And so on January 20th, 1865, the people got to enjoy their emancipation that they had been waiting for 2.5 years prior to that.
So the enslaved people knew.
They did.
That I did not
They
realize.
were fully aware, so much so that they celebrated. Remember?
Yes.
Freedom's Eve,
Yes.
January 31st, 1862. They were looking forward to January 1st, 1863. But with the end of the Civil War, the Confederate states were not just going to say, okay, it's over now, you can go. It just
Correct.
didn't work that way. It had to be enforced. And
It had to be
so
enforced.
it took 2.5 years for the Union soldiers to arrive to enforce, right? So that's why Juneteenth is significant.
I mean,
That's
that
why it
is
warrants celebration.
absolutely because it was 2 years prior.
That's right.
That-
So
Unbelievable.
can you imagine being an enslaved person in Texas for those 2.5 years, right? The law guaranteed your emancipation, right? But you lived in slavery.
And if you tried to leave, we know
Absolutely.
what would happen there.
Absolutely.
That is unbelievable.
Yep.
Thank you for this lesson
You're welcome.
because you learn about it in school, but you don't learn about it in
right.
school like this.
right.
Unbelievable. So this is how, I heard Opal Lee on your YouTube just say change.
Mhm.
Must make change.
Mhm.
And do you think we are making change?
Yes. It would be hard to argue that America has not evolved, right? So absolutely, America is still evolving and making change. Are there opportunities for a faster implementation of change? Absolutely, right? But I would be remiss and dishonest if I suggested that America hasn't evolved. It certainly has. Absolutely.
It has.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of work to do
absolutely.
on everything,
Absolutely.
every aspect
Yeah.
of the world.
Yeah, there's this thing in America called black wealth that exists right now that didn't exist before, right? And so there's all sorts of evidence. There are liberties, and I think most people would agree that America provides certain liberties, right, that other places may not, right? I don't want to speak for anybody here. I'll speak for myself. I just don't want America to think that she has arrived, right? It is an ongoing evolution, right? Ongoing evolution.
I'm writing this down because this is big. There's big news here. Big, big, big things. Um, what do people, Black community, do they know about Juneteenth and what you just shared with me? I'm hoping this podcast is gonna.
Yeah, so some do. We have widely been misinformed. Let's be clear, Juneteenth was not a big deal in the rest of America until 2021, right? America, on the strength of the work of Miss Opal and her forebears like Dr. Ronald Myers, Representative, excuse me, the late Representative Al Edwards in Houston, she had forebears that did this work, but it wasn't until, 2021 when President Biden signed the bill into law that America recognized that Juneteenth was something that warranted celebration. And so the miseducation is the byproduct of the fact that it just wasn't on people's radar, right? The signing of the bill, making it a law, put it on people's radar. And so now people are just now waking up to what Juneteenth actually is. The beautiful thing about that, it presents an opportunity for us at the National Juneteenth Museum to tell that story in a very, very compelling way. We are not just narrating a story, we're narrating a story that you're going to enjoy learning about. We're spending a lot of money to make sure we tell the story the right way. So you're going to have an experience when you visit the National Juneteenth Museum, not just learn.
I can't wait. And Opal Lee has the pen that Biden signed
does.
with. Yep, I saw
She
that.
does.
She's very proud of that pen.
And it might surprise you that one of our first donors was President Biden.
Wow.
You know why he was one of our first donors? Because when he invited Miss Opal to the White House, she said, "Now I need a check from you, President Biden, and I'm not leaving until I get it."
Oh,
And if you know anything about Miss Opal, nobody tells her no. And so President Biden, Joseph Robinette Biden, wrote a check to the National Juneteenth Museum as a donor. So
Wow.
that's
It's
the kind of impact that Miss Opal Lee has on you when you encounter
She
her.
does. She
Yep.
does. That is quite amazing. I know the emotions I feel
Sure.
with learning this history. What do you think other people feel when they learn this history?
Yeah, some people, for whatever reason, and Tiffany, I can't understand why for the life of me, why people are resistant to learn this. I, a friend of the museum is Mr. Brian Stevenson. And Brian Stevenson is a renowned lawyer, author, civil rights leader, and he curated and opened a museum in Montgomery, Alabama called the Legacy Museum. And he narrates a very colorful story about the Black experience in America, not just the pains, but the joys of being Black in America. And he helped me understand that museum curators have an obligation to tell truths. But for whatever reason, Brian says people don't want to learn. I don't know why historic truths make people uncomfortable, but there are lots of people that get uncomfortable talking about history, right? For me, when I talk about the ugliness of slavery, I am not speaking from an accusatory perspective. None of us were alive with slavery, right? But there's a faction of people seemingly that want to erase the reality that it existed. And that is quite frustrating. And so there are people who don't want to learn about the history of Juneteenth because you can't talk about Juneteenth without talking about slavery, right? But the beauty of Juneteenth, we were able to get, thanks to Governor Abbott, we were able to get a $10 million appropriation from the Texas State Legislature. The Texas State Legislature understands the power of Juneteenth so much so that they wrote us a $10 million check. And so if the Texas State Legislature, which Lieutenant Governor Patrick says is the single most conservative legislative body in America, sees the value of Juneteenth, and I don't know why other people don't as well. But
That is amazing.
yep,
That if it's the largest,
that's right.
I mean, what I did a podcast during the George Floyd
Hmm.
issues up there and that horrible. I
Summer
did this and I
2020.
and I had three black men in my studio
Yep.
and I just was like, I'm so sorry. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. I'm so sorry for slavery. And they said what you said. You weren't here.
Yes.
You didn't do that. But I'm
Yes.
like, but just that's why my question. How does this make people feel emotionally when they feel this?
Yeah.
I feel guilty
Some people feel
because
convicted. Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Because it's just it's history
Yeah.
and history is powerful. You were you a history major?
I was not a history major, believe it or not. I was not. I'm a marketing guy,
Oh my
right?
goodness. So see,
Um,
I mean, just the power of history,
yeah.
I mean, I went to the Jewish Museum in Dallas when I was right out of TCU
Hmm.
and thought, I'm going to be a Jew because I'm going to fix all this.
That's
Well,
right.
yeah, okay, right. I'm a little Catholic girl. You know what
That's
I
right.
mean?
That's right.
But that's my thread and that's my fabric of, you know
I
what I mean?
mean,
Who.
so I'll say it this way, Tiffany. uh, Generally speaking, and I'm not professing this to be true, but generally speaking, the dominant faith in America is Christianity, right? You don't get a resurrection without a crucifixion, right? So, but when you
Mhm.
tell the Jesus story, you have to tell that on a Friday there was a crucifixion, but there was a resurrection, right? But the resurrection doesn't mean anything without the crucifixion. The same thing, emancipation doesn't mean anything without enslavement.
Right.
So they're just one part of the same story. There's no fixation on the enslavement. We want to celebrate emancipation. That's what Juneteenth is all about.
That's right. And Opal Lee said in your video, we just need to keep celebrating
Absolutely.
because that's the day of celebration.
She says that we should celebrate, America should celebrate from June 19th until July 4th.
Okay.
Right. That's what, and Miss Opal said it. So that's what we do with the National Juneteenth
That's
Museum.
right.
Miss Opal, we celebrate from June 19th through July 4th.
He remembered. I'm looking at your system. He remembered a date or two, Tori, of course. um, this, the, you was this museum, and if forgive me if you said it, this was your dream, Opal's dream.
Yeah. So,
Cure me.
so Miss Opal just wants Juneteenth to have her proper place in the American tapestry. she didn't really care how that happened, right? She just was an advocate for it. The idea of a museum came through me, right? Because again,
It
at
was
the
your idea.
at the core, but to be fair, Miss Opal has had a Juneteenth museum in Fort Worth since the late 1990s,
Okay.
right? So let's be clear about that. It was small, and she refers to it as the hind hills of hell, right? It was a small former house that she and her former husband owned, and she had collected some artifacts, and it was very impressive, but it was small. It didn't have any funding, right? And so my idea to build this culture center was to have the museum as the anchor. And because Miss Opal already had a museum, I said, Miss Opal, why don't we just scale what you already have? And that was the genesis, if you will, of the National Juneteenth Museum. Listen, if you're going to do it, people ask oftentimes, and maybe you're going to ask, and so forgive me if I'm getting ahead of you, why not Galveston, since that's where the soldiers arrived? Well, with all due respect to our friends in Galveston, because we have a great working relationship with the folks in Galveston. But there are a couple of factors there, not the least of which is, and this isn't at all meant to be condescending toward Galveston, but Fort Worth is the 10th largest city in the country, right adjacent to the ninth largest city in the country. And so when you talk about the DFW Metroplex area, you're talking about 8.5 million people. And people converge on Dallas Fort Worth for any number of reasons. And so there's no comparison when you talk about visitation, because if a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a sound. We want people to be exposed to the work of Juneteenth, and we think that's more viable and palatable in the DFW area. The second thing is Miss Opal Lee is, for all intents and purposes, at least in this era, the face of Juneteenth, right? She was the person that President Biden called to be there when he signed the bill into law. She's been on the front lines for more than 50 years. And then the third thing is, again, she's already had a Juneteenth museum in Fort Worth. So it's not a new idea. It's something that's already been here. And so the confluence of those elements makes Fort Worth the right place for us.
Just
Not to mention the fact that shout out to the city of Fort Worth, Mayor Matty and the council for giving us $15 million to help make this happen.
wow. That's
Yep.
amazing.
Yep.
That is absolutely amazing. What a great community. That leads me to the impact you hope this has on Fort Worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Fort Worth is already a mecca for museums. People
Oh.
from across the globe converge on Fort Worth to visit museums, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your viewers may or may not know that Michelangelo's first painting is in Fort Worth right now.
Mm-hmm.
You at the Kimball, right?
Right.
So this is a museum place.
Mm-hmm.
And so what better place to build a museum than Fort Worth, right? And so we have been intentional because we recognize the power of the museum district in Fort Worth to not disappoint. What do you mean when you say that? You're not going to go to the incredible museums, the Amon Carter or the Kimball or the Modern or the Fort Worth Science and History Museum, and then come to our museum and be disappointed or have an anticlimactic experience. Our vow to them for the incredible work that they've done through the years and decades is to make sure that what we do is commensurate with the type of work that they do there. So Fort Worth is the place for museums
I'm telling you.
and growing. Cowgirl Museum, all of them.
I know.
Yep,
It is amazing.
absolutely.
Absolutely amazing. And look what you're doing. Look
Yes.
what you're doing. Okay, so tell me the plan. So it is 2026 right now. What month is it? May
Yeah, I think so.
2026? I think so too. I'm not real sure. May 2026. So we're going to talk about your event that's coming up.
Yeah,
But what is the projection and understanding? We have rain, we have codes, we have
yeah,
all that business with construction.
yeah.
But where are you now and what are you forecasting?
Yeah, so the next big thing for us happens, God willing, this fall. We are collaborating with the city of Fort Worth the city is working to vacate the building that sits on the museum site right now because the city was gracious enough to yield that building to us. It was in disrepair, right? So they didn't think it prudent to use tax dollars to go and invest that kind of money into that center for lots of different reasons. And so, but they are still actively using the space. And so we can't move forward until they have vacated the space. And so they have built a plan. Shout out to Assistant City Manager Valerie Washington. Hey, Val, and her team are working feverishly to vacate this fall, which will allow us to go and demolish that building this fall. So if we have our druthers around October 7th, we will go in and demolish that building, which represents the commencement of our construction. Now, a couple of things have to happen, Tiffany, and I hope your viewers can help us with this. We've raised north of $50 million for this project.
50.
50. We're at around
Wow.
$52 million,
Okay.
right? We've got a $70 million capital campaign,
Okay.
and that is not going to be enough to completely wipe out all the debt. The reason for that is because we got our estimates in 2022,
Oh,
and
inflation?
inflation
Yeah.
and those other elements have inflated the cost of the building. And so when we first started this campaign, it was going to cost us around $45 million to erect the building. We were going to use the remaining 25 to endow the museum because museums need endowments, right? So, but we're more than 70% of the way on our $70 million capital campaign. And a gentleman named Ron Parker, who led the lead on capital campaign for TCU a couple of years ago, where they raised 1.1 billion. It's Bravo dollars. He led that campaign, and he passed away unfortunately last March. But before he left, he said, "Jared, we're going to raise $100 million for the museum." So we're on the race to raise $100 million. I say that because a lot of it is predicated on our ability to raise the rest of the funds, because the last thing we want to do is to incur debt to build this because it
Sure.
inhibits operations like a museum. So,
Mhm.
but if we have our druthers, we will commence construction this fall, and it's a 2 year build. So give us 2 years. We're looking at the fourth quarter of 2028, first quarter 2029, worst case scenario, if
Wow.
we have our way.
I can't wait. I'm
Neither
so
can
excited.
we.
Neither can you.
Neither
I
can Miss
know.
Opal,
I
right?
know. I know. I know. I know. So, when you look at what you've done, this is your legacy. It's going to be
If you say so.
for sure. I mean, you're humble, but yes, this is. You have to be so proud of what you are doing. He's getting nervous. If you're on YouTube, you can see he's a little nervous right now. You have to be
um,
so proud of what you're doing. I
yeah,
mean,
I am thrilled, but it's way bigger than me.
I know it
Right.
is.
There are hundreds of people working, and
Mhm.
people who have to contend with me, like Tori sitting over there, who have to deal with me. This is the fruit of a lot of people's labor,
Mhm.
right? So while I'm happy and thrilled that I'm fortunate enough to be sitting in the center of it, I recognize that I'm working on the backs of a lot of other people's work, right?
Mhm.
So maybe it is my legacy. I don't really care about that very
I
much.
know, but still, just
It's
take it.
uncomfortable talking to me. It
I
is.
know.
Thank you, thank you. My therapist has been, dude, get over yourself. Just say thank you and go on. So I'm listening to you. I'm listening to all those
Shout
people
out
who've
to
been
his
telling me
therapist.
yes. I
Oh
need to
my
just
gosh.
take it and go
Yeah,
on.
just say thank you. That's
Yes,
true, but
thank you,
I'm very
thank you,
proud
thank
of
you,
you.
thank you
Yeah,
so much. Seriously.
absolutely. Okay, one thing that you would hope listeners would get from this podcast today would be
Yeah, the significance of Juneteenth,
Mhm.
and I know you said one, I'm sorry, I'm hard headed, and the significance that this project is going to have on the city of Fort Worth,
Yeah.
right? And we really, really, if I can make a petition to those watching us, to those listening us, we really, really need your help. There's a myriad of ways that you can help us. You can certainly help with our fundraising. You can log on to www.nationaljuneteenthmuseum.org. I'm sure that's probably going to be on your screen. This is 2026, right? So
Yes.
there's probably going to be a QR code and all the fancy stuff. But you can log onto the website. You can volunteer with us, right? There are a myriad of ways that you can. But the bottom line is we really need their help,
Mhm.
right? And so to the extent that they will help us, whether they're praying for us, whether they're donating to our capital campaign, whether they're volunteering, we really need their help.
Well, you always need to let me know of events. And speaking of events, you
Yep.
got one coming on. Let's get a little deeper about that. I
Yep.
know the dates if you don't.
Yep, I know the dates. Tori, I know the dates. So that are having the second presentation of the Freedom Vibes Juneteenth Festival. Our vision for this festival is to become America's epicenter for the celebration of Juneteenth. We want the world to converge on Fort Worth every year to celebrate Juneteenth. And so we're creating a party to make sure that they can do that. So starting on June 11th, we have a 10-day festival. Now, I want to make sure I say this. It's bound by an art exhibition that's going to start on June 12th and go through June 19th. You may be familiar with the name Cedric and Letitia Huckabee,
Yes.
right? So they have an art gallery over in the Polytechnic Heights community where we're going to be having it. And then our friends Dr. John Barnett and his crew have an African American art gallery and museum. And both of those locations are going to house our art exhibition that starts on June 12th and goes through August 19th. But within that, on June 11th, can I go through the
Yes.
profile? So on June 11th, we are having what we're calling a Freedom, help me, Tori, Freedom Soul Cipher.
Okay.
And this is just four musicians sitting around shedding, just free flowing, right? This is what Prince used to do after his concerts. He would go to a local club, give us some musicians, and just let it rip. But that's what we're
Yes.
going to do here. So if you want to come, check us out. And on June 12th, we are launching the art exhibition with the reception at the two places that I mentioned. We're also going to have a line dance event that we haven't even told the world about, so you're hearing it here first.
Oh,
So I don't know when your broadcast is. So June 12th at Texas Wesleyan University. Shout out to Dr. Messer at Texas Wesleyan. We're going to have a line dance event. It's a craze in the Black community. These line dances, you can get thousands of people together to do these line dances. On the 13th, we're going to partner with the Historic Southside. By the way, we're going to partner with the Historic South. No, that's not the 13th. We don't have any event on the 13th, do we? All right, so on the 14th, we are having a celebration of choirs. You talk about the Black church. In the Black church, legacy at the core of it is the preaching and the choir, and they go hand in hand. Well, because of COVID, choirs kind of dissipated in the early 2020s, and so they have made a major comeback, and we're going to celebrate. It's a part of our culture,
sure.
right? And so we're going to bring some of DFW's best choirs together at the Potter's House of Fort Worth on Sunday, June 14th at 4 o'clock. And guess who's going to host that event for us? 20-time Grammy Award winning Kirk Franklin. Fort
Wow.
Worthian Kirk Franklin. So Kirk Franklin is coming home to help
Oh,
us celebrate Juneteenth with the celebration of choirs, and who better than he? That's on the 14th. On the 15th, we have an entrepreneurship workshop over at the Women's Club of Fort Worth on
mhm.
the near South Side. On the 16th, we're having a voter education workshop. People need to understand the value of the vote. We're not telling you who to vote for. You
No,
just need to understand why you're voting and what you should vote for.
because it's a right and we've all
Absolutely,
gained it, right?
absolutely. It is the foremost American right.
People dying,
Right? Absolutely,
men, women, what
absolutely.
color? I mean, yeah.
So we're not talking about who you should vote for or what you should vote for,
Mm,
just why you ought to vote.
right.
On the 16th, we are having a culinary skills workshop led by the incredible chef Tiffany Derry,
Yes.
right? So Tiffany's going to join us. And then on Thursday is when our concert series starts at Bass Hall with the Temptations and the Four Tops, the legendary Temptations and the Four Tops. Quick story about the Temptations. There's a movie done by about the Temptations 20 years ago, and there's a popular line in that movie where I don't remember who said it, but he said, "Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis." Right? Otis is a member of the
Hmm.
Temptations. Well, now Otis Williams is the last living member of the original Temptations, and now everybody's coming to see Otis, right? So talk
Everybody.
about the irony.
Yeah.
But Mr. Williams, God willing, will be with us on June 18th, and the Four Tops will be with us, and that's at the legendary Bass Hall. And then on Friday the 19th, which is Juneteenth, we want people to go and support Miss Opal's Walk First. And then at 3 o'clock that afternoon, we're having a fashion plus comedy event at the historic I Am Terrell. And then at 7 o'clock at the Convention Center Arena. Most people don't even know that the arena exists. It's the spaceship downtown that's going to be demolished later this year. It's our understanding that we are having the last concerts to ever be held at the Convention Center Arena. Paul McCartney, Elvis Presley, all of these people, Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner have performed at this arena, and we're going to hold the last two concerts with an 80s event featuring the SOS Band and Freddie Jackson and Glenn Jones and Angela Winbush and Midnight Star. And then the next day, which is the close of the festival, this is the 20th, we're having a 90s concert featuring Blackstreet, Stokely Williams of Mint Condition, Next, Case, Carl Thomas, and that event will be hosted by the incredible ghost himself, Omari Hardwick.
Wow.
And then we have an after party hosted by Lorenz Tate. So we're going to party in Fort Worth for 10 straight days to celebrate Juneteenth. And this is the second year. And our goal, Tiffany, is to scale it every year so that, again, America converges on Fort Worth to celebrate Juneteenth.
Wow. Just amazing.
Yes.
I'll be there.
Good.
Not every day.
You should come every day. You'll be
I
tired
would
at the end
love
of it,
to.
but
I'll
you should
bet.
come.
I'll bet. By
We
the
welcome
20th,
you. We
I would.
welcome, listen, get tickets, www.freedomvibes.com. That will also be on your screen, right?
Yes,
All right,
absolutely.
freedomvibes.com.
Absolutely. We're going to have it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Is
you.
my time up already? I thought we were just getting started. No, how much time? We got another 20 minutes. The next question. No, I'm giving you a hard time. Thank you for having
You are
me.
so
Thank you for the
welcome. I mean,
invitation.
thanks for saying yes.
Yeah,
I
we are
appreciate it.
excited about telling our story, and we'll tell it to anybody that will listen. So
Nice.
thank you for extending the invitation to
Well,
us.
thank you. We're going to have all your socials up on social media and so much more. Tickets and especially the YouTube. Oh my gosh, the
Yes.
rendering of the Juneteenth Museum. We are so excited to be part of this. And obviously, any questions you have, you can send it to myself. And again, their socials will be in the show notes. And you know, this show is about creating awareness,
Yeah.
creating change, continuing change, and impacting generations to come.
That's right.
And we're going to
Absolutely.
keep that lineage going for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. And anything I can do to help. But everyone, I say it every single Tuesday to you, and I mean it. Keep being fabulous.